Hi everyone, welcome to 20 something. I am your host, Jennie Arado, and join me as we journey together in navigating and figuring out adulting life. For this episode, we put attention to the mental health of our listeners, especially those in their 20s and early 30s. How has society's demand affected our young professionals now? What is this seemingly universal feeling of a lack of motivation? Is this normal? All these and more we will discuss today. As much as finances, physical health, and career growth are important, it is also crucial to sit down and talk about our mental health. This is despite being called a generation of whiners, weakling, or was. It's time to talk about this because history has shown us that not talking about our feelings and what we're going through is not of any help. So, with us today is the External Director of Center for Psychological Extension and Research Services, or COPERS, of the Ateneo de Davao University. Welcome to 20 something, Sir Gabriel Sebastian Lizada. Hi, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Jenny. Good morning to our viewers. Good morning to everyone. It's a good day to start, no? What a way to start today's topic or your day talking about an important thing, especially that is sa mga ating mga viewers na 20-something. So, I'm Gab. I'm an assistant professor for the Department of Psychology from Ateneo de Davao University. I'm also the current external director for the Center for Psychological Extension and Research Services. And something interesting about me is that mental health is my passion. It's something that I really want to talk about and help other people understand themselves better through this mental health advocacy that we are feeling right now, especially during this pandemic.
Correct. So it's very timely, Gab, no? Kasi not only this is a time of quarantine, pandemic, we're away from our family, but May is also the, if I'm not mistaken, mental health month.
Correct.
Mental health month siya. So we would like to really sit down, as I've said sa introduction, to really sit down and talk about what we're feeling, our problems. So, Gab, can you tell us what exactly Copers do sa how do you help people?
Okay. So, the Center for Psychological Extension and Research Services, or COPERS, is the community engagement arm of the Department of Psychology from Ateneo de Davao University. In 2006, it was founded by Dr. Orencita Lozada and her colleagues. Um, when I came in COPERS in 2013, it was already managed and directed by Dr. Rodora Gail T. Ilagan, the current department chair of the Department of Psychology. Currently, the director for COPERS is Dr. Maria Isabel Lemon. What COPERS does is that it is manned by health professionals, psychologists, mental health advocates, and affiliates together with trained volunteers. So at a young age, we train our students, both undergrad and postgraduate, for in helping community needs, implementing novel psychological applications, psychosocial support, psychoeducation, peace psychology, sector reform, mental health management, crisis intervention, and trauma rehabilitation and post-disaster recovery planning. But what we do in Copers, it's more of there's no blueprint to everything. We look at it as each community, each individual is unique. And therefore, we adapt that kind of mentality that we first immerse ourselves with the need of the community and then we implement such interventions. And we are primarily based on Mindanao. However, we have affiliates all over the Philippines.
So it's very good. We're glad to know na here in Davao City, here in Mindanao, we are able to avail, pwede tayong mag-avail ng ganung services, psychological services, whatever it may be, post-traumatic, ano man yan siya, related or personal problems. So we will learn more about that. In particular, we would like to talk about this quarter life crisis, or if it is such a thing. No, so we would like to know how we can lessen the symptoms if there are any. We want to know how to help people in their 20s and 30s in figuring out this crisis, quote unquote crisis that we're going through. So as mentioned in the comments, in the introduction, yung quarter life crisis, maybe one of the symptoms is this universal lack of motivation. So aside from that, Gab, what are the other symptoms of someone experiencing quarter life crisis? Or
Right.
before that, what really is quarter life crisis? Is this a thing?
So, Jenny, allow me to get a little bit nerdy for a while, ha? Medyo
Go
parang
lang po.
kailangan lang natin establish muna yung context. So, a quarter life crisis is maybe experienced by an individual, excuse me, in the period we call as emerging adulthood. So what is emerging adulthood? Emerging adulthood is the period in which an individual is in transition between adolescence and adulthood. So kaya hindi natin masyadong nahihirapan tayong man-navigate yung period na ito is because during this emerging adulthood period, there is an internal struggle that is happening within the individual between independence and commitment. So when we say independence, it's the individual, wanting to prove himself, asserting his or her identity while relying less on the parents. So for the longest time, childhood, adolescence, we have been relying on our parents for both financial support and safety needs. So when we go home, there's food in our table. Um, we have a house to go home to. If we need financial things such as money, we ask from our parents. But as we slowly navigate and as we grow older, we are slowly thinking of how do I assert my independence as I grow older. Okay. And this is one of the important milestones in the theory of development. So we're talking about establishing my own identity, which is something that is related to independence. Commitment, on the other hand, is I'm going to use the term fidelity. Fidelity to the chosen career or job choice or personal choices that you make. When we talk about fidelity, it's faithfulness. Am I being faithful to the choice that I am making? Okay? So what happens here is that as the individual begins to assert his or her own identity, questions such as who am I? What do I want to become? What career do I want to be in, or what field do I want to be in? And even questions on what is really my sexuality is very common during um, quarter life crisis, as what they say. But more importantly, when we are experiencing these symptoms of quarter life crisis, this is an active part of our life. When we say active, it's not sitting and letting it happen. It's finding out what my identity really is. For example, if I am a student who just graduated from a course on business management, I might try different fields. I might try going into the business field, or I might try to be an entrepreneur, or I might go into another field that is not related to the course which I graduated from. This is a normal thing that adolescents might go through when they have quarter life crisis. So what are some common signs and symptoms of quarter life crisis? First is when we're talking about uncertainty with the current job or career path. Okay? Um, like what I mentioned, di ba? I'll give my personal example as a precursor to my quarter life crisis, which we'll talk about later, is that once I graduated college, the question was, what do I do with my psychology degree? Because psychology is such a vast, it gives you various options. You can go into HR, you can go into teaching, you can go into clinical, you can go into rehab. That was the question that I asked myself. What did I want to become? So for our listeners here who are also asking themselves the question, or um, starting to look at their life in the future or their current situation right now, it's normal to ask yourself what career or current job you are in. Is it something that is for the future? Another common sign should be, and this is something that is very culturally appropriate to us in Western culture. When you hit college or university years, you are expected to get a loan and enroll yourself in college. However, for us Filipinos specifically, it's it's very common that we stay in the house of our parents, of our relatives, until the time that we are sufficient confident enough to live on our own. So that decision of asking yourself, should I leave my parents' house and start an independent life, is a very, very common thing that we ask ourselves. Diba? So parang, if you're going to look at your older brothers or older sisters, are they still living in the house of your parents? Or kayo mismo, do you ask yourself the question, when will I leave the comfort of my home? So this is another thing that is a question, a common question in quarter life crisis. If we go into relationships, um, during your 20s something, relationship is very, very important because individuals now look at relationships from a long-term perspective. Will this person, or is this person the right one for me? Or questions such as, I'm almost 27, 28, 29. I'm at that tail end of my 20s. Why am I still single? Um, my friends are getting married. My friends are getting engaged. My friends are starting families. And here I am just focusing on myself. So this sometimes triggers what we call as your quarter life crisis. In terms of major decisions, we can also look at it as a long-term decisions. Do I consider migrating? Should I move to Manila where there is better opportunities, more job opportunities, whereas I stay here? Do I change fields? I graduated from a business field, but maybe I can go to another field. Okay. Um, there's also uncertainty of making large decisions that I have been single for so long. I have enough money. Do I start investing in stocks? Do I buy a house? Do I buy a car? And lastly is, some things that we get to ask ourselves is that, am I in a good job? Am I in a job that I like? Um, what is it that I need to do to make myself feel that my life is worth something, that my life is meaningful? Um, so yeah, I think those are the things that we ask ourselves commonly when we are experiencing what we call as a quarter life crisis.
Okay, that's very, very helpful, Gab, no? Especially that you mentioned very specific na mga situations. For example, tail end of your 20s and everyone's getting married, everyone's getting engaged, or if not promoted, it's either relationship or career talaga, or family relationship that triggers these questions. So it's as what I'm getting from what you said, this is no longer just an existential crisis. This can also be an identity crisis na rin siya altogether, no? Kasi you would want to know na ano ba talaga yung gusto ko? Do I really want to pursue this 4-year course that I graduated from or hindi? So many questions are happening. But what I want to pay attention to talaga, what you said about different culture in America after 18, they leave the house, they they take loans for their college, for university. Sa atin iba. So I would like to point that out din kasi na quarter life crisis is not of course race related, 'di ba? So but how is it different pa rin from one person to another regardless of their race siguro, regardless of their culture, or because of those things, how is it different from one person to another? Or maybe how is it also the same?
Each I'll start first with the differences.
Mm,
Each
mm,
individual will experience quarter life crisis or questions on their identity, uncertainty, to some extent existential crisis, very very differently, because of triggers. And I think it all boils down to what we value. Um, some people who value or who long for relationships will get
mm,
triggered with the fact that my peers are getting married. My peers are starting with a family. Okay. Maybe I'll share my experience.
mm,
As I began to teach rather, I started asking myself the question na parang, should I change field? Because I know that I'm employable in other fields. But
mm,
why am I teaching? And why am I getting X amount of salary while my peers are, I'm seeing that they're earning more. They're beginning to buy stuff for themselves. They're beginning to, you know, be self sufficient. And that triggered a lot of questions on my end. Um, and then it all boiled down to me asking myself the question, what do I value the most? And that was helping. So helping is in being in psychology and being in the mental health profession, helping is more, if you ask me, more rewarding than any financial um, matters. So when I am able to help someone and says, thank you talaga, sobrang natulungan mo ako, that for me is rewarding enough. Um, so each will experience possible hints, ang each will experience different triggers rather for their potential quarter life crisis. Um, so some might experience because they value money, finances, traveling. They might experience it the same differently. But to some extent, there are also commonalities between individuals across the world who are also showing same signs. So these are the signs of career, relationship, finances. Yan tatlo yung very, very common. Um, and it's not parang good to treat it as I'm feeling it alone. I'm feeling it as though nobody understands me when we're talking
mm,
about this important, active meaning finding process in our life. Because there are a lot of helps available. There are a lot. Your friends can be helpful. Your parents can be helpful. Your mentors in college, your former teachers are also helpful. Um, so when we're talking about how is it different, yes, because there might be some triggers. People value different things, but there's also commonalities, di ba? For example, if I really dreamt of becoming an accountant and I achieved my goal, then it will not be as evident as someone who was confused in his or her career path. So for example, in that career path, sinabi na, um, ay, sabi lang ng magulang ko or ng parents ko na you have to become an engineer and that's not what I want. So, but I'm here already. So people sometimes who are forced to a career have a lot of questions more. What if I followed my
mm,
dream? What if I became an artist? And this triggers a lot of difficult things in within the person, occupationally and personally as well.
Mhm. So, is it safe to say that the difference of one person versus another person in dealing with quarter life crisis has a lot to do with how they were brought up, of their environment growing up, their parents, their family? Is it safe to say that?
It could be a factor, but it's not the
Mm,
one factor. There are a lot. Like,
mm,
I know I was brought up well by my family. They were very supportive. My parents were very supportive of my career choices, my education. My mom always told me that willing ako magasto basta sa education mo. And I
mm.
still had that quarter life crisis.
Okay.
Whereas someone who was maybe possibly forced to a course could not have a quarter life crisis. Um, so in psychology, behavior is very, very it's there's no one true explanation for behavior. But yes, environmental, family factors could be also a big factor, or not a big factor, a factor in triggering that quarter life crisis or questions.
Mm-hmm. So, just bringing this question out there, does the person's upbringing, current environment, and lifestyle cause crisis? And you said it depends. So, what other external factors are we looking at that can trigger someone to experience quarter life crisis? Because if I'm not mistaken, a person can go through his or her 20s or 30s na walang quarter life crisis na na-experience, correct? So,
Yes,
ano
correct.
yung mga external factors na possible kaya?
Aside from family environment, there also is lack of job opportunity. Diba? I
Mhm.
wanted to become a astronaut. Oh, let's say I wanted to become an astronaut. Pero parang we can't have that in the Philippines right
Hmm,
now.
okay.
Or I want to become a writer. I want to publish a book. But as you start to write, you get rejected over and over again. That triggers, am I a good writer? Did I earn the necessary skills? And you in the media, how many individuals wish to become or to be part of the media, but how many actually get in? So if you get
Mhm.
rejected, that also is a factor. So lack job opportunities, family, finances also um, is important. So for example, if you are the breadwinner of the family and you want to have a job that is not financially stable, um, you have to build your career. So if you want to become, let's say, an artist or a painter, if you're still trying to build yourself up, then and your family wants more consistent income from you, you might consider asking your no, you might ask yourself, should I give up my passion so that I can help my family? Um, or for yung typical, not like the businesses that we have, di ba? The parents, the family want to pass on their business to the child or the adolescent. Pero si adolescent ayaw, gusto ng own identity. Kumbaga, um, that also triggers something. So there are a lot of factors that trigger quarter life crisis. It can even be um, I see my classmate back in high school traveling the world. Why can't I travel the world? Why am I just staying in one place? That as simple as that could be triggering. Social media could trigger your quarter life crisis because you are seeing everybody succeed.
Mhm.
Nobody posts in social media, or it's rare that you see someone in social media post about the bad thing that's happening to them. So when you look at
Mm.
social media, it assumes that everyone's life is going the way they want it to be. They won't, or the tendency is that hindi siya ipopost. So once you see your peers, your classmates successful in the fields that they have, that they are in, or they're exploring the world, they're earning this, they're earning that, um, that triggers a bit of insecurity. Why am I not achieving what they are achieving? So yeah, no, there are a lot of external factors as well.
Mhm. I would also like to ask about this generation thing kasi maybe the older generation would think na yung ito talaga mga millennials ang daming problema, bakit nade-depress, bakit they feel bad. We had the same we go through the same age before, perhaps same din ang ating pinagdaanan na after college we had to seek job opportunities pero hindi kami na-depress. Hindi naman kami naka-experience yung quarter life crisis that you're calling. That's why I ask, first of all, kung totoo ba yung quarter life crisis because there may be older generation who would disregard that and say that's not a thing. So coming from you, we would like to know na, is this a generation thing? Is this something that only the millennials experience? Or ginawa-gawa lang ba ito ng millennials? We would like to know kasi I'm looking at my parents and older generation. I think, in my own opinion lang, they could be tougher. They went through a lot din as well, but mental health siguro wasn't talked much about time nila. So I want to know if this is a generation thing.
So yeah, I would also agree with you in a sense that mental health is more open right now
Mm-mm.
than it was before. And I don't think that's a bad thing, especially mental health talks about being able to express yourself, being able to be honest with yourself. I think that's the most important thing, that when we're not okay, we should let other people know that we're not okay. Um, for example, you feel bad, you're not supposed to feel bad for feeling bad. You're not supposed to feel that, ay hindi ko ba dapat ito ma-feel? Because that's important. Now,
Mm-mm.
is quarter life crisis a generational thing? I think, in my humble opinion, it's more evident. Okay, it's more evident right now. Why is it more evident? Because of the access of information that we have.
Mm-mm.
Siguro dati sa mga panahon ng parents natin, how do you write, paano sila manligaw? They write letters, and then the letters ipapadala sa post office, and then maghihintay ka ng 1 week bago sagutin, and then ang dami na nangyayari in 1 week. But now the access of information is very fast. So when one says I'm lost and posts it in Facebook or in their social media account, diba? I'm lost, I don't know what to do, I'm not feeling motivation with my job. Everyone chimes in on the information. Ako rin, ganyan din ang nafe-feel ko. Don't worry, laban lang. So, all this information is easier analyzed in such a way that maybe there was quarter life crisis before, but it wasn't as evident as we have it now. On top of that, the success of people are easier to notice, di ba? So, merong how many billionaires are under 30? Oh, so si number 1, si number 2, si number 3. Oh, let's say number 5 is a 21-year-old billionaire. And here you are at 21 years old asking yourself the question, when will I be a billionaire? I'm only earning X amount of money. Siguro if I work 100 years saka ako maging billionaire. So that triggers a lot. Um, the access of information, and to some extent social media, can have an effect on our self-esteem. If Especially if we see a lot of people succeeding, especially if we see a lot of people achieving their goals. Of course, we're happy for them. Of course, we know that they earned it, that they worked hard for it. But we cannot sometimes doubt the feeling na, paano na ako? Ano nang mangyayari sa akin? Which triggers a lot. So, if there are external triggers for quarter life crisis, there are also internal triggers for quarter life crisis, such as you had a goal that by the age of 30, you would have started a business. And here you are at 29, not having enough money to start a business. Um, that triggers an internal quarter life crisis in such a way that anong nangyari sa akin? What went wrong? So questions such as that can trigger you know this crisis that we have in our 20s.
So it's also safe to say that people older than us, maybe the boomer or the Gen X, also experience quarter life crisis. It's just that different yung take nila, different yung approach nila. Maybe they didn't have time to talk about it because it was a busy time for them siguro. But now with social media, you can talk about it. People, as you said, could chime in. So it became a thing, no? Tama ba na it became a thing that we thought this is the first time experiencing all of this.
And it could also be learning through observation. The elder generation
Mm-hmm.
or the older generation saw that when their parents had difficulty, hardship, the parents did not talk about it. The parents of our parents, ang lolo at lola natin, they didn't talk about it.
Yes.
They
So,
just
mm-mm.
went through it. They did not complain. And so for them, what they saw, they mimicked because it was successful for them. Uh, um, so it's something that we can also consider as learning from previous experiences, learning from observing. And
Mm-hmm.
kaya medyo
So,
nagka-clash si older generations and millennials is because sometimes the older generations impose on the younger generations, and the younger generations will always try to assert their independence. Iba kayo sa amin. Hindi kami ganun.
mm-mm.
Iba yung panahon ngayon. Kaya nagka-clash sila. But what I learned from experience is that as you grow older, you would seek the information and the wise words and the wisdom from your parents. Adolescents will not
Mm-mm.
yet understand this, but as you grow older, you ask advice from your parents on how to navigate life. But for individuals who are starting to assert themselves, they would not see this as help. They would see this as parang, why are you deterring? Why are you stopping my progress, my individuality? This is who I am. Tanggapin mo.
Mm, okay. So may ganun pa na ano na attitude pa kasi starting pa lang. But
Yes.
eventually when you mature, you realize na I can actually tap my parents and ask how did they do this in the first place, 'di ba?
I mean, that's not for
So
all,
okay.
but yeah, that's a
Mm.
common thing, di ba? Na, and maybe if you can
Mm.
ask, we can ask as you grow older, maybe if you go back to this video 10, 15 years from now, you'll see that you'll try to seek counsel from your parents as well.
Mm. Pero you mentioned din kanina that our parents may be facing their problems or their challenges in life the way they did because their parents, bale our generation's grandparents, did it the same way. Parang nagaya na nila, naandan, kumbaga. So they kept their mouth shut kung may mga challenges and they go through it. In contrast, tayo na generation, mas status tayo, we post everything on Facebook. How which part ba tayo nag-iba? Kasi sila, ginaya nila yung parents nila. Bakit tayo na generation hindi natin ginaya yung parents natin? In contrary to that, gumawa tayo ng other way, how we face our problems. Which part doon kaya na nag-detour tayo?
Uh, to some extent, hindi naman tayo completely naglayo from our parents. Like,
Mm, okay.
for example, pag nakita ng anak, like the adolescent child, nakita niya na inaalagaan ni tatay, ni father, si mother, the the adolescent woman, lady, girl, will also want to find someone who has similar characteristics with the father. And that
Mm.
also includes work ethics. Gusto ko yung mapaasawa ko, yung mapangasawa ko, parang tatay ko, na inaalagaan ang nanay ko at nabibigay lahat ng gusto niya. So when we're talking about work ethics, yun yung tanong mo na parang, where did we differ? And I think we differed in a sense that we grew up in a different time, in a different generation, where information is very easy to access. And when you look at information, it tells you that you should assert yourself, that you should find out who you are, that you should not let anyone stop you, that you should keep going to find and achieve your goals. So, once all of this is put in your unconscious, this is where disagreement happens with the elder generations. And this is very, very important because inside the workplace, boomers and millennials clash. Okay? Because studies will tell you that elder generations, okay, older adults, I think that's the better term, older adults or adults in their mid career would prefer to work collectively or as a team, whereas millennials would
Mm,
prefer working
individually.
individually. And millennials would ask for advice only if they need it. I think from my experience, pag sinasabi na pag may workmate tayo na medyo senior sa atin, 7-10 years na sa company, at nagbigay ng advice na hindi solicited by the millennials, what happens? Nagagalit, nagka-clash. Bakit mo ko sinasabihan? Di ba? That also feeds
Okay.
um, conflict. Okay? But in terms of upbringing as well, um, parents have something in mind for their children. They want their children to succeed. They want their children to have the best life. I think it's just we see it differently. Like parents see it as kailangan mong imana yung business natin para makuha mo yung life na gusto namin sa'yo. Whereas
Okay.
children see it as I purposely took a course on art so that hindi ko
Mm,
imana yung business. Because I want to assert my identity. I want to assert my individuality. So parang yun yung clash na nangyayari. Are older generations more hardworking than the younger generations? Possibly not. It's just that we might tackle things very differently. Iba lang talaga yung approach natin.
mm,
Maybe millennials would prefer, or the younger generations would prefer to have or take certain risks, shortcuts, creative ways, whereas the older adults would most likely want it, step one, step two, step three. Kaya nagka-clash
mm.
tayo paminsan.
So it's really important no to determine even in a basic level how one generation is different from the other generation. So since we're already talking about social media and you already mentioned kanina, how exactly does social media play a role in this quarter life crisis that we speak of? Kasi during the time ng parents natin wala namang social media. So how does social media play a role in this?
I think honestly, no, there are good and bad things about it. Ako
Yes.
kasi I
Yes.
come from a mentality that emotions and thoughts are doesn't matter if it's true or not. I think what matters for me is it helpful for me towards my goal. Okay? So if let's say I lose my job because my boss tells me that I'm not competent enough, what matters to me is will this feedback from my boss motivate me or demotivate me to
Mm,
work harder? So if I don't want the feeling na parang sasabihin sa sarili ko na 5 years ago when my boss told me that I'm not competent enough, I hated that feeling. And I used that motivation towards something. Now, going to your example, the social media play a role in this? It could. It depends on you. If you see your friends, if you see your peers succeeding, how will you react to it? Will you see it as a motivating and a driving force? Or will you see it as, kawawa naman ako, buti pa sila? Um, because some people lower like exposure to exposure to social media decreases their self-esteem. But for some, it serves as a driving motivation. Kaya niya, kaya ko rin. Bakit nagawa niya, dapat kaya ko rin yun. So it depends on how you approach the situation. But generally, if you ask my opinion, um, social media can do a little more harm than good, especially if you begin to compare yourself with other people.
Okay. So, moderate use lang of social media, no? And try to understand how you react to it negatively or positively ba? So, another follow-up question on the previous questions, no? Because this is a quarter life crisis, so we're kind of expecting na hanggang quarter lang siya ng life natin, that there is an end to this. So how often or when often ba natin na experience yung pag-stop ng quarter life crisis, and at what age usually okay, I'm more or less stable na with my feelings, with my emotions, parang maisip natin na, okay, I'm done with this quarter life crisis, I'm more confident. Kailan usually yon?
Ito na naman yung it depends ko na answer, no? It depends. Kasi
Ah,
nga, are you actively seeking a resolution to your question?
mm,
If you're feeling it at 22 and you don't actively look for an answer to
mm,
your problem, it can last, pwede nga siya tuloy-tuloy hanggang midlife crisis eh. Um,
mm,
but if you're actively trying to search, why am I in this position? What is the job that I want? What is the kind of relationship that I want? What is the career that I want? How do I improve my finances? Then you can have a direction and end your quarter life crisis in what, 6 months, one year, even less, could be more. Because, for example, if your quarter life crisis is about relationships, you haven't had a relationship for so long, and you want to start a family, and you're just there waiting na parang sasabihin mo na, sige, darating lang yung the right one for me. Work from home karamihan. Sino ang possible ma-meet mo if you're working from home? So, the way I see it is that if quarter life crisis is an active phase in your life looking for realization, hindi mo mahanap ang sagot if you're not doing anything about it. Finances, relationship, job. If you're in a job that you don't like, your quarter life crisis will not end if you don't try to sell yourself, if you don't try to improve yourself, if you don't actively look for a job that is better suited for what you want. So it can end as early as 3 months, 6 months, a month, but it can also extend longer than that. It depends on how you want to approach the situation. If you're open enough to admit to yourself na I'm having a difficult.
mhm. So as much as questions like, do I love this job? What do I want to do with my life? Is this really my direction? As much as these questions are normal, it is also important to actually face these questions, no, na they're not just questions in your head. They are questions for a reason, and those reason are, you have to find the solution, kumbaga, whether with a friend, with a family, or as a person. Because as you mentioned, this will not go away. This can even transition to midlife crisis na wala nang pahinga. Quarter life, dire-diretso na until in your 40s or 50s. So we don't want that to happen. So what we're getting here is the questions in your head are there for a reason. You need answers, you need help. You might want to seek help if it's lala na talaga. So with that, I would like to ask, is a quarter life crisis possible na maging severe siya to the extent of depression or anxiety or any other more serious na mental health condition?
Yes, especially if you don't feel content, di ba? So, Depression symptoms are loss of motivation, dysfunction every day, impairment in everyday life, anxiety is thinking about the future. So yes, of course, especially pag you start to feel and act as if it were true. Diba? I'm so kawawa naman
Mhm.
ako, buti pa yung ibang tao, or you start to think about 1 year from now, andito pa rin ako, so that's anxiety, that could be depression. Um, but it could also be na even with quarter life crisis, you don't develop mental illness. It could be that you are sad. It could be that um, you feel uncertain about the future because sadness is not depression. Uncertainty is not anxiety. These are normal things in life that we have. So just because you are experiencing quarter life crisis does not give us the right to diagnose ourselves. If you feel that something's wrong, seek help.
Mhm. Okay. So, for example, naman, you have a friend that you think is suffering or experiencing this crisis. How can I be of help? Or
Okay.
what assistance can I offer this friend?
All right. Let me answer your question in a twofold answer. First, maybe tips on yourself. The first tip that I'm going to give to yourself is be honest. Be honest with yourself. Are you having this quarter life crisis? And what is triggering this um, quarter life crisis? Understand what triggered. Is it finances, relationship, work, stagnant, feeling stagnant, less consistency in your life? And be honest with your parents and friends as well. They might be able to help you. Second is ask yourself the right questions. Ask yourselves the difficult and hard questions. Because we ask ourselves the question and nasasagutin natin pero and then you ask days from now itatanong mo sa sarili mo, bakit andito pa rin yung feeling? Possibly because you're not asking the right questions to yourself. Third is failing is also learning. So failing to land that job, failing to land that relationship, failing to earn as much is also learning. What do I need to do to get to where I want to become? And fourth is if it's not working for you, ask for help. There's nothing wrong with asking help. Let's normalize asking help. Seeking help from a professional, a therapist is not bad. It does not make you crazy. It actually tells us strength. The strength that you understand that you cannot do things on your own and that you need help. Pag may sakit tayo, we go to a doctor. Pag masakit ang ngipin natin, we go to a dentist. Bakit kapag meron tayong problem with our emotional health, we are afraid to seek a professional uh, who specializes in this? Tips for a friend who is undergoing this is that don't judge. That's the thing na parang don't judge because no problem is too big or small. A problem is a problem in itself. We don't know how difficult it is for this person. So a problem is doesn't matter if it's too big or too small. Be that friend who gives that ear. Be that friend who gives that hug when needed or that shoulder to cry on. The second is understand the context. Where is this person coming from? Um, is it coming from a culture where the family expects him or her to imana yung business? Is he coming from a context where he or she is expected to um, be the breadwinner? And then this is something that I learned a few years ago is that sometimes listening is enough. When someone approaches you and tells you their problem, ang default mode natin usually is to provide answers, is to provide solutions to their problem. But sometimes being there, listening to that person, just allowing them to express what they feel, pahungaw, ipapahungaw lang natin sila, is enough help for them. Because not all problems are meant to be solved by you. Sometimes problems can be solved on their own just by being there for that friend.
Okay, so, God, that's very inspiring. We hope many people get one or two tips for that, just to help their friend, because one friend help is one soul na natulungan against this mental health, and we're hoping that the stigma will be removed. As you mentioned, nahihiya tayo to go to a therapist because it might make us crazy or called names. So, as you mentioned, yes, let's normalize asking for help. So, yun nga, we've tackled a lot. Um, I'm sure our live audience have questions pa rin. So, we are going to start now with our live audience questions. From Facebook, we are streamed live right now. So, the first question, this is from, let's see, from RJ Lumawag, how can someone overcome midlife crisis? So I think this is ano na siya. I mean, I think he meant quarter life crisis, midlife crisis when you're your late 40s or 50s. So we already gave a few tips to overcoming quarter life crisis, but do you want to add more from
Uh,
what you've already mentioned?
so yun na lang. Maybe RJ also is in a point where he is in a midlife crisis. So maybe how can you overcome midlife? I know it's extended to the topic, but midlife crisis.
Mm-mm-mm.
It talks about another developmental milestone, which is what we call it as generativity versus stagnation, according to Erickson. So sa midlife crisis kasi iba ang hinahanap. Kung sa adolescent, it's more on identity and intimacy. Sa midlife naman, ang hinahanap nito is generativity, or how you can um, make a mark on the younger generation. So kaya sa midlife crisis, hindi common na yung mga magulang natin na nagko-coastal cleanup, nag-GK, nagdo-donate, kasi nga they want to feel
Okay, okay.
more meaning in their life. Kasi nga nahanap na nila yung
Ah,
identity na nila, naka-establish na sila ng family. What more can I do in terms of family in this world? And the next step is to make my mark. So find something that is um find something that makes and finds meaning in your life, that will extend through your time. Parang ganon.
mm, mm, mm. So that's good, differentiating quarter life crisis and midlife crisis, no? Kasi quarter life, identity, midlife is your, kumbaga, silbi mo, society in general. So iba-iba pala siya ng way of tackling it and overcoming it, no? So that's good point. Even if extended siya na topic, no, I've learned something new na yun yung kaibahan niya. That's why our parents want to yung mga GKK, catechism, iba-ibang mga extracurricular activities because that's how they deal with it, no? That's a good insight. So next question, Poshi Tesoro. How do you identify that you are in a crisis, whether life, a quarter, or midlife? Nasagot na, but we can add to that also. Are there red flags so people could easily identify it? Ano po yung mga red flags na nasa
So I think,
crisis na?
yeah, I think the biggest red flag is beginning to question something. So quarter
Mm,
life crisis, questioning your identity, questioning your job, occupation. Midlife crisis, questioning, did I make an impact, or how can I become a better impact? How can I become a better citizen? Kasi ang midlife crisis, it goes to a point where yung generativity has to fold. If you are married, generativity means how do you want to impart knowledge to your children? Whereas if you are single, how do you want to make a mark in your community? Because the feeling of
mm,
emptiness is there. Parang sabihin mo, parang may kulang. Parang hindi ito yung life na gusto ko. That's the biggest question that you want to ask.
mhm. So we start from there. We start from the questions, and then nagsusunod-sunod na yon from whatever else we should be experiencing.
And usually
Okay.
naman sa questions naman siya nagbibigin talaga lahat nun. Bakit
Mm, mm,
ganito?
mm, mm.
Bakit hindi ako happy? Bakit parang may kulang? And then, it spirals to question after question after question after question.
Mhm. Yes, and as you mentioned earlier, it's in how you answer these questions that will get you out of that situation, whether as an individual, with a friend, or with your family. Okay, so we're learning a lot. Questions is not a bad thing. Just keep the questions coming. They are normal. If you need help, there are people around that can help. But the questions will come. They are normal. Okay, next question. Next online question is from Flor de Mayo. Which doctor can you refer for consultation?
uh, I'm talking about mental health consultation. No? So I'll
Yes,
be
po.
biased here.
Oo.
Message us in the Center for Psychological Extension and Research Services. And then we will direct you towards a doctor or a mental health practitioner. We have a network of psychologists. We have a few referrals for psychiatrists. So if you need help, message us for the Center for Psychological Extension and Research Services.
Mhm. And if I'm not mistaken, do you still offer the online consultation ninyo? Kasi 'di ba it's pandemic, mahirap pumunta sa clinic. So how can they access that? How can they register for an online mental health or psychological consultation?
If you go to the page for COPERS or Center for Psychological Extension and Research Services, there's a link that you can click there. We respond hopefully mga 2 to 3 hours max na yon. Max ng 24 actually. 2 to 3 hours usually ang turnaround time. And then we direct you towards a mental health practitioner. And yes, we offer online counseling because safety comes first, your safety and our safety as well.
Okay. So I guess we covered a lot this morning. Thank you so much, Gab. We hope that our listeners learned a thing or two. We hope that finally mental health is no longer, at least after this episode, my konting realization that mental health shouldn't be shunned, and we have to sit down and actually talk about this. We have to realize the significance of communication when it comes to mental health. Thank you so much, Gab. Thank you for your time and for Copers. To all our viewers, we hope you learned a thing or two about our adulting topic for this morning. If you have comments, questions, or suggestions for topics that you want us to feature here at 20 something, do not hesitate to email us at ssdavao@gmail.com. Until next week for another episode of 20 something, this is Jennie Arado. Thank you. Goodbye.